When I left Christianity and fundamentalist church, I realized that Christianity has a deep hatred for any worldview that is different from theirs. So, Christianity hates evolution because it goes against their deeply held beliefs. Being homeschooled in fundamentalist curriculum from North Florida in the 2000s to barely into the 2010s, I definitely missed out on a lot of evolution and scientific education that does not line up with the Bible. The problem with only teaching things that go along with your beliefs and support your beliefs, that's not what education is about. That's not how adults educate themselves. You don't just read things you agree with. When I want to learn about things, I go to credible educational programs, magazines. I get it from the liberal, the conservative, and the scientific communities. I don't just read it from one specific person. I try to get different qualified people's opinions, their scientific fact, and how they view or use the education that they have. Only teaching and learning about things you believe in. I mean, can you imagine how much curriculum, information, and access people will lose out on just because they don't believe in something? I mean, you would not believe the idea that, you only teach what you believe in. Imagine all the gaps kids in Christian homes maintain, even into adulthood, because they weren't taught everything they needed to know. What happens if science, mathematics, anatomy, earth history, evolution doesn't match what you believe? You're just not going to teach it? That's the answer from a lot of places and in a lot of religious homeschooling. If they don't believe in it, they want to shelter their kids and not teach them about it. This is borderline isolation. It's borderline abuse. Anyone who controls your access to information that educational and academic scholars say kids need to experience and be aware of, and you don't teach that, you are keeping your kids from having curiosity. And kids need to be exposed to all forms of ideology, thought, historical relevance, religion, without it being funneled through a very small lens. I have gaps in my education, specifically in science and reproductive education, because my parents believed if you can't do it, you don't need to know about it. And it's so damaging. Evolution is important. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to support it. But every kid should learn about it in multiple grades. And for me never to even have a class in it, are you kidding me? And it's not just evolution. It's anything religion and political parties view as not being okay. It's very abusive. It's very isolating. And it minimizes kids' curiosity when they can't gain access to something, or they don't even know that something exists. Because Christians view education, they view belief as something that is intertwined. It's kind of like a marriage. You can't have education without morality. And what is the only source of their morality? God. Christians don't believe that morality exists outside of God. They don't know the meaning of the word morality without God in it. Which is why, if you don't believe in morality outside of God, you're not a good person. If you need a God to be a decent person, to force you to be a decent person, you're not a decent person. Nothing in this world forces me to do bad things. No God is going to keep me from doing something I want to do, or would force me to not do something I don't want to do. I don't need a God to know that it's wrong to take away someone's autonomy, to harm someone either physically or by my words. I mean, if you need a God to give you morality, you're an awful human being. And yet, they believe that without God creating the world, nothing makes sense and no life would be valuable. If you water down your morality, where you have to have certain things in place to acknowledge morality at all, you're on sinking sand. If you base your morality on what God says, or what Goddess says, or whatever human leader you're basing your morality off of, it's a sinking ship. All a leader has to do is quote a God. And most of these people who call themselves Christians or moral people would believe whatever this person said. There's a reason why Christians are more susceptible to believing anything than any other group on the planet. I mean, the term drinking the Kool-Aid was created because of Christians. And when parents and institutions of power won't teach young people about anything that does not agree with their beliefs, you have a problem. What if this institution or family does not believe in consent, contraceptives, birth control, and prophylaxis? They're not going to teach their kids that these things are important? What if the parents don't believe in medical healing? They're not going to take their kids to the doctor or to a medical licensed physician because they don't believe in anything but religious healing? That is some messed up stuff right there. They're not going to teach their kids why we don't do crimes because God said so. Is that what we're going to go with? Well, we know that God commands his people to do horrible things. At least that's what it says in the Bible. And at the end of the day, it's just an excuse. You can use God all you want. You can blame your actions on God. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, religion is how people justify their worst behavior. It's just that simple. And if you won't read, educate yourself, or worse, your own kids, based on things you don't want them to know because you don't want them to ask certain questions. What about the LGBTQIA community? You're telling me you're not going to educate your kids that 1 out of 5 kids are not straight? So you're not going to educate your kids about orientation because it's not something you agree with? A kid kid isn't any less bi because they don't know what it is. They may be more confused. They may be more depressed, more suicidal, more isolated. But you can't make somebody something they're not. You can fake it. There are a lot of gay bi people out there that are in straight relationships because they don't want to smell the coffee. They would rather live a lie than be who they really are. And there's really only one reason for that. You get more benefit in our culture when you're straight than when you're genuine. And I'm not saying people who are straight aren't genuine. I'm saying that I would say half of the, and I'm being generous here, I would say that half the people in the Republican Party are not straight. You can't be. You cannot be straight, be at Charlie Kirk's funeral, and crash a Grindr app. You just can't do that. Straight people aren't on Grindr. There's only two kinds of people that are on Grindr. Curious people and non-straight people. And not teaching kids about orientation and sexuality, how to protect your own body based on what activity you do. Not teaching kids that things like virginity and body count are utter, ridiculous, manly created things that don't exist. You're not going to teach your kid how to be a full functioning person because if they hear about something, they might become a type of person you don't want, which could never happen. You can't become something. You just realize that you are that something. 93% of depressed, suicidal kids would never consider drastic measures if they had one positive, affirming conversation with their parents. 93% would not be taken to the hospital after attempting suicide if their parents had done their job. Your job is to accept, protect, educate, discipline, and prepare your kid to make their own choices. Anything less, and you should not have ever had kids. It's just that simple. It's not your job to decide what your kid is. It's your job to prepare your kids to have the critical thinking required so they know who they are. You can decide what a kid's name is. You can decide what a kid's gender is, temporarily, until the kid takes back their autonomy and says, that's not who I am. But I grew up in fundamentalist homeschooling. In this culture, they don't teach you something unless they agree with it. And kids graduate and go to college, if you're even lucky. And they have so many gaps in every type of curriculum and topic imaginable. It's scary. The very lowest form of state and federal rules that exist to monitor homeschooling. And I read somewhere that the majority of Christian or religious academic books that are used in homeschooling or religious education would not pass the minimum requirement for any academic placement tests or requirements. They just wouldn't. When 1 out of 3 words is something that's not based in reality, scientific fact, or biology, you understand where I'm going. These kind of people, they don't want their kids to know about orientation, sexuality, consent, safe sex, anything that contradicts the Bible. They will refuse to teach their kids. And depending on what state you're in, if you're in public secular school, Your parents can pull you out of a class they don't agree with, even though it's factually, scientifically accurate, and the most brilliant academics in the state or in the country have declared these things need to be discussed. Parents can still take their kids out temporarily or completely. If they don't like what's being taught and they're a conservative state in a state that doesn't recognize critical race theory as illegal, parents, religious parents especially, will take their kids out of these environments so their kids won't learn about ethnic history or ethnic inclusivity. You don't have to believe in something. You don't have to support it. But don't educate your kids in just the things you agree with or believe in. It's utterly damaging. And it's taken me 15 years to glean the information I was not taught by people who never should have been allowed to produce books that don't even meet the minimum requirement to be approved in any state that isn't MAGA. And if a state in the top 10 to 15 states in America would not approve it to be taught in public schools, we should not be teaching it to our kids. Personally, I won't live in any state that won't teach critical race theory, black history, and queer history. I won't live in any state that won't teach those things. And for the price we pay for education in this country, the quality of education is like going to McDonald's. It's not like going to the best restaurant in town. It's like going to McDonald's. And in states like Florida, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Louisiana, their education is a joke. You can't place 50th out of 50 states. The goal is to be number one. And every year, they always place in the last three, 48 through 50. Imagine having your kids grow up in that state. Where there is red republicanism, that's where you will find the worst education, the worst academic scores, the highest STIs, the highest murder and homelessness. Where there is conservative values, there is rampant educational and academic ignorance. I mean, you have to be that in order to believe the BS they're selling. And you wonder why Louisiana, Oklahoma, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, why they are the worst in education. They're Republican states. They don't understand why certain things are important. And just when you think it can't get any worse, they don't teach evolution or condom use. I don't know how any kid makes it out of their 20s alive and STI free in those states. They don't. 85% have something. And that doesn't diminish your value as a human being. It does diminish some of the quality of life where you can go through life without having to deal with these things. But it doesn't make you a less valuable person to realize your education was shit. Your STI classes were an embarrassment, also known as abstinence-only education. Sometimes it takes half your life to make up for the information your parents intentionally kept from you. And I have to live with that. My parents don't have to. They don't care. I think it's a lot of ignorance, and parents don't know what's best for their kids. That's been proven. There are some parents who do know what's best because they have the education and critical thinking to back it up. But where there is conservative, traditional family values, there is rampant ignorance and lack of education, quality education. So evolution, not for Christians not to teach their kids evolution. That's just the tip of the iceberg. They don't teach him about discrimination and why homophobia is bad either.